How embarrassing. You caught me editing the big show. Hey guys, it's Brian. Doing some YouTube stuff. Today's episode, we have Alex Schiffer on the big show. It was great. Great to meet him. Great to have him. Talk about all kinds of fiery takes around trade deadline and Blake Griffin's first minutes. Construction outside. You know, what can you do? City living. Yeah, roll the intro. Let's just get this going. Start it already.
Welcome back to the Glue Guys. This is Mike here. Say hello, Brian.
Hello. Hi. Greetings. I'm not gonna. It can't.
That's a polite.
You know. It's too
Alex.
Yeah.
We have a guest today, and you won't. Alex. Every time I bring you up to Alex does the hello, and yet you won't give him a hello.
I get nervous in a crowd. That's what.
I know. I've been. I don't know what I did for that. Yeah. to not get it. Yeah.
It's out of respect, honestly. That's what it is. It's. I mean, it's out of shame more than anything, which is a form of respect, the highest form.
So
Okay.
today we have Alex Schiffer.
This is like the time Matt Damon got on Jimmy Kimmel, except he didn't have to take the host hostage. This is just kind of nice.
Yeah, we've been to the which my bosses at the company demanded that Alex know.
Yeah.
Alex is on.
What is the story with all this between you guys? Is it just naturally fun with it? Did you guys know each other, or do you just naturally?
It's manufactured beef.
Right.
That's what I call it.
E-drama, the perfect kind of e-drama. Yeah.
Kind of like Tyson's.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. We're hoping to continually be at war with each other, and it gets noticed, and then we become famous for hating each other.
Celebrity boxing match incoming.
You know what's hilarious though is that I've legitimately had people approach me like asking if Mike and I don't like each other. I forget what Mike called me on Twitter.
A no talent hack.
No, it wasn't venomous. It was like I can't remember what it was, but someone texted me. I can pull this up pretty quickly, but he texted me. He's like, "Hey, like, what's the deal with you two?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I've never heard someone talk about you like this. Like, what did you do to him?" I was like, "Oh, like that's just how he rolls." So
he does. He has been rolling that way on Twitter in recent days, for sure, Mike. You've been really stepping on landmines left and right here.
And we'll talk about those landmines on today's show. I mean, I'm a hated person on Nets Twitter right now because I suggest that Nick Claxton maybe could be an appealing trade piece, which we will talk about. No, but it is a joy to have you on, Alex. I appreciate you. We had Bruce Brown on last week, and now we have you. So we're just continually going up and up in the world.
Bruce Brown's a undersized center in the NBA. I'm an undersized center in local pickup games. So we're kind of keeping that trend going.
Nice.
So we have a lot to talk about. I mean, this is trade deadline week. So exciting. The Nets are sort of lurking in the background of the trade deadline discussions because they have Spencer Dinwiddie's contract to deploy at any moment. But we have to begin with Blake Griffin himself debuting as a Brooklyn Net. He debuted against the Wizards. We'll just do sort of roundtable reactions. I'll start with Alex. I think you were in the building.
Mm-hmm.
That one.
I was.
What did you make of Blake Griffin's debut as a Brooklyn Net?
You know, I don't want to feed into all the people that were predicting him to dunk in his first game and show that, the Detroit situation was a huge part of the whole thing. But I mean, he comes in. I called a screen assist for that Landry Shamet corner three. Then he meets Bradley Beal at the rim the following possession. And I'm thinking, like, hot damn. I mean, people were questioning him as a small ball center. He just blocked one of the NBA's best scorers on his first possession as such. And then he got up for the first time since December 2019 as his first basket. It's a limited sample size. I mean, Blake Griffin was on a minutes restriction. He only played 15 minutes, but, like, I don't know how you don't like what you saw. I mean, he looked like he'd been with the Nets all season instead of just 2 weeks. I don't really think he took a bad shot. And Washington's kind of a weird team where they're not very good, but they've managed to hang with it. Washington and the Pistons have just played the Nets very well this year, it seems like. But I thought all things considered, you couldn't help but like what you saw.
Yeah, I mean, the dunk. I mean,
a legendary con job. That's what happened here. He
so
played
silly.
rope-a-dope for a whole year and has now revealed himself. Yeah, no, I mean, like, it's obviously an incredibly small sample size, so not a ton to be gained from it. But as far as those first receipts are concerned, like, that's a rotation player. That's a guy that's creeping into DeAndre Jordan's minutes and so on and so forth. So, hard not to be excited about that to the extent that you can.
Yeah, I thought it was a failure, to be honest. I thought he should have played better on D. Did you put
that on Twitter? Make sure you put that on Twitter.
Right after your Nick Claxton trade tweet.
Let me ask you, Brian, is the dunk, if you're a Pistons fan and you see that, how do you feel?
Here's what it was generous of him to do, was like, it wasn't that hard of a dunk. So there was at least some genuflection to, the fact that he didn't dunk for a long time. So it wasn't he could have like really, cocked back and made a giant to do about the whole thing, but he kind of daintily dunked it in just enough, the right amount.
My interpretation of the daintiness is that he was almost in air. I mean, again, it is impressive. The guy hasn't dunked since 2019, I think was the and our boy Bruce Brown says that he assisted on the dunk. I think that's what he says. He was the last person to assist on a Blake Griffin dunk. I didn't look up the stats. I just trust Bruce implicitly now.
I like Bruce that he advocates for himself. Bruce, it's important. Yeah.
Self-promoter.
He has, to be honest, he has a lot of the Spencer Dinwiddie quality to him. When we had Dinwiddie on when he first got to the Nets, no one knew who he was. People were angry that Yogi Ferrell was off the team and Dinwiddie was on it, and we were randomly bringing up. We did a game with him. Which Dragon Ball Z character would you be? And he was like, I'm Vegeta, like right away. And we're like, all right, Spencer, calm down. Proved to be true. Bruce Brown was advocating for himself on the podcast as a guy who could stop LeBron in the finals, essentially. But the Blake Griffin dunk, I think there was an element of, it wasn't a true showmanship. It obviously wasn't Blake from the Clippers. There was a sense of like, ooh, I'm a little too far from the hoop right now while I'm in air. He does dunk it down. He said after the game, and Alex, you were in the presser or the Zoom presser, which is what we're doing now. Blake didn't want to look at the bench, right? He didn't want to try to like catch the eye of his teammates because he knew that he was a little bashful.
Yeah, the whole bench went nuts. You had DeAndre Jordan like that statue in South America or whatever with the arms stretched out.
Brazil, yeah.
Yes, Brazil. That's right.
Jesus?
I haven't taken a geography.
You mean Jesus?
I haven't taken a geography course in a while. He had.
We are gonna do South American geography at the end of this pod. We'll figure out a way to do that.
Sounds good. But he had his arms stretched out. Claxton was going nuts. Bruce Brown was hopping up and down. So he had a little bit of a smile, and he even said, he's like, I knew it was going to be a thing whenever it's kind of like getting a monkey off his back of like, I knew I hadn't dunked in a while. I knew it was going to be a big deal whenever I did again. And he tried to avoid looking at the bench, but then he saw everybody up in the look on DeAndre's face, and he couldn't help but crack up from it.
I thought it was interesting. There was a little sense. I mean, he played 15 minutes, so what
on the
are
dot?
we
gonna...
yeah. And I think, was it just 2 shifts? Was it 2?
Essentially, yeah. He came in towards the end of the first quarter and stayed on through the second. And same thing with the third and the fourth. I actually think they pulled him a little early in the fourth just for the like he wouldn't have. They were trying to keep the thing as close to 15 as they could because he went to the scorers table with like 5 left in the third, and I think he didn't end up checking in for like another full minute. They did another sub with him still there, and then same thing with him getting pulled out. It was kind of earlier than they pulled most of those guys off that unit.
And so like we're trying to do small sample size theater. We're trying to extrapolate those 15 minutes into what does it mean for the Nets throughout the entire run. But Blake at times was on the floor with Claxton. He was on the floor with another big. So he's not playing small ball 5 exclusively. And maybe that'll change, but for now that was the case. And also there was a few possessions where the ball, not that it went through Blake, but Blake did have the ball in a position where he was kind of assessing the offense for a second, and then he would pass it quickly. And I thought that was interesting because that is what Blake could bring to a lot of teams. If it wasn't the Nets, I think like if he went to the Bucks or any other team, his playmaking would be the feature. For the Nets, it's kind of like, he doesn't really need to do that, particularly if Harden's on the floor or Kyrie's on the floor. But they're going to be able to mix that in where like Blake can kind of play make from the Jokic spot where Jokic typically play makes.
I was looking at this before the game yesterday. Barely any Nets forwards and centers not named Kevin Durant have had 5 assists in a game this season. The way that that's about what Blake was averaging in Detroit. I think it might have been 4 something for assists per game, but again, that's not what they need him to do here, but that does give them a different dynamic at that position than they've had all season, right? I mean, Jeff Green's been terrific as a spotted 3-point shooter. We're going to get more into Claxton later in the podcast, but he does give them a different look there on that front. And he had that one, I think I know what you're talking about, where Washington switched everything. Beal winds up guarding Griffin in the post, and he does a little, draws a double team, dumps it off to Bruce Brown. Bruce Brown dumps it right to Claxton for, it was like a hockey assist.
Yeah.
So like that like they can move the ball differently with him out there and have some different looks. And as you said, is it going to be his calling card here? No, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. And with, I guess we'll get to this later too, but without Kyrie these next 3 games, I'm kind of curious to see, do they try to run more offense through him just from the playmaking standpoint, not as much the scoring standpoint?
And to that exact point too, I was actually interested to see Bruce Brown trying to look for his finish a little less last night for the first time in a long time. He was participating in the hockey assist as the guy who was doing the actual assist, which I hadn't thought about. Bruce Brown needs to add some extra layers when teams start to actually plan out for what he does, and that's a particularly good choice. If he's going to do something like the little wraparound passes, I feel like he can get a lot out of that.
Yeah, and Bruce Brown, you're right, teams are actually kind of preparing for him a little bit now. It's there's a momentum. I mean, obviously it's because he interviewed with us and teams really, who's this?
Put him on. Put him on. Yeah.
He was on the glue guy. It's sort of like when James Fry's book was on Oprah's book club. It really took off. Right. We're basically the Oprah of basketball. I don't think anyone would disagree with that remark. But there's a lot of interesting pieces, and I've talked about this before. And Alex, I'd like to get what you think about this. It's there's a ton of talent on this team. It's ridiculous. That's obvious. But doesn't Steve Nash deserve credit for molding that talent and mixing that talent all together? You could go to Whole Foods and get the same groceries as Alex Schiffer. She's going to make a better dish than me, how much credit does Steve Nash deserve for what's been happening with this team?
For those that took the prop bets for the Glue Guys episode today, I had the under on Alex Kelly references, but
Alex Shelley,
whatever.
I don't know who that is. Do I need to do?
I don't know who that is either. Honestly, I'm more of an Emeril Lagasse, Bam celebrity chef fan. But to answer your question, no, I was really curious when he was non-committal before yesterday's game as to who Griffin was going to play alongside. I was really curious to see what those lineups look like because, as you said, Claxton's been playing too well to not still have time, and he gives them a different dynamic.
Playing very well. An intriguing level of wellness.
Yes. I know where you're going with that. And as you kind of said, they have, they went from not really having a lot of front court options to having now a plethora. And I think it was, I've even wondered before with Claxton's versatility. And whenever Durant's back, do we see them go super big and have DeAndre, Durant, and Claxton in the lineup at some point if they need that much length, which I don't know if they would, but food for thought. So I thought it was good to see that, as you said, that Nash is finding ways to keep all these guys in the rotation. I was really curious to see what the rotation looked like with Griffin in it. They played 10 guys in the first half yesterday. The only 3 that didn't see the court were TLC and the 2 two-way players, Chios and Perry. So the next element of this, and it's, Shamit's out. We're going to talk about the road trip coming up, but what this looks like when they're fully healthy to me is going to be very interesting because you can make a case for playing 11 guys. That's not really how you would think it'd look in the playoffs and whatnot, but Tyler Johnson's giving them good minutes. They're really getting a little bit of help from everywhere. So I do think Nash deserves credit for how he's found ways to get creative with these lineups and not only get these guys on the court at the same time, but have success. Claxton and Jeff Green have a ridiculous plus minus on the court together. I thought Blake and Nick looked great yesterday together too. So I do think Steve Nash deserves some credit there.
Let's do a fun game. Power rank the bigs.
Wow.
power ranking the Nets bigs in this very moment, not future potential, not, whatever they mean for the franchise. Just right now, if I had to choose a guy playing the 5, Durant's out of the list. He doesn't
Where
count.
are we counting Bruce Brown?
Yeah, that's a great question.
So you can count Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, Nick Claxton, DeAndre Jordan, and Blake Griffin. Okay?
Wow.
So within that mix, I mean,
It's
Bruce
hard.
Brown is a little...
It's hard. I know who's last, but I don't know who's first. The first.
Tell
is
me
the
who's
tough.
last. You tell me. I know who you
I mean,
want to say.
I mean, I'm gonna say it. Well, this is kind of contextual, right? Because
Oh,
here
don't
I go with my
parse
equivocating. Here I
words.
go. Ready? Ready for this?
Don't
Ready
contextualize.
for this bullshit? So, yeah, because like you bring in a DeAndre Jordan, a 10-year plus vet or whatever, who ostensibly should be, your defensive anchor. You've hired him for that specific job, and that's the one. That's the one thing. Yeah, right. And that's the one thing that you long for whenever he's around. So that's sort of where I think it's like, is he the worst in the rotation? I don't know, but like for what we actually want him to be doing, he's the most frustrating in my opinion.
That's a really nice way to say
where
that.
he comes in fifth. But obviously, like Nick Claxton's played like 5 games. He's not, we don't know. He's an unknown
number
quantity,
one.
and he's probably number one.
Number
It's
one.
it's hard to know.
So again, it's Blake, Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, DeAndre, and Nick Claxton. Alex Schiffer, to you. Give me your rankings.
I agree with Brian's leadoff hitter and Caboose. Putting the next 3 is kind of tough because the sample size with Blake is so small. I almost feel like he has to be 4th, right? I mean, like, not even a knock on him, but like, I mean,
Sure.
you have a season's worth for almost everyone but Claxton and Blake, but you have more sample size of Nick counting from last year in the G League, if you even want to use that in the context of the Nets, than Blake. So I would almost say Nick, Jeff, Bruce, because teams, as you said, teams are starting to get a book on him, and his size. Oh, he already had a ceiling with that to begin with, given he's 6'4" and already being asked to do way more in that spot than most other guys. I mean, if he was doing this against Joel Embiid in the playoffs, then it's like, whoa, I take back everything I said and give me all the crow. But I'm going Nick, Jeff Green, especially with the, not even, Nick Claxton can shoot threes, but he hasn't hit them yet. Jeff Green's 3-point shooting percentage this year is terrific, and the way he can help you as a floor spacer for sure. So I'd say Nick, Jeff, Bruce, Blake, DeAndre.
Yeah, and to me, and like it is matchup specific, right? If we're looking at, if you're going to play the Sixers, they're going to play the Heat, they're going to play the Bucks, the Knicks, whoever it's going to be. I still put Jeff Green number 1. I like what he does most. I like what he does mostly for me on the floor in a lot of different situations. He's not as switchy as Claxton, and I'll get to this, but the joy right now watching this team, beyond like the excellence of Harden and Kyrie's ball handling and Joe Harris like somehow just being wide open for 3, and you have such an excitement level for that ball about to be fired off and go in, is Nick Claxton switching on to a guard. Like that is to me, like if I'm ranking my joy to the world, Nets world, that's one of them. But yeah, I don't know.
No.
But I still want Jeff Green out there. I still want that reliable veteran presence, particularly in the playoffs. I love Nick Claxton, but this happens. Like rookies with athleticism, I know he's not a rookie, but young guys with athleticism pop. And can you rely on that in the playoffs against Giannis?
Let me pose this question for you, Mike.
Please pose.
Does it concern you, like, of those players, the overlap, the Venn diagram? There's not much, but if there is some, it's Jeff Green and Blake Griffin. Are you worried that there's going to be an eclipse of the sun?
An eclipse of my heart. Yeah, there's going to be. What was the solar eclipse? What was the thing that? Remember the thing that like the moon went in front of the sun?
You're thinking about the movie Apocalypto? Is that the?
Oh, yeah. That's. I always think about Mel Gibson movies. Constantly,
your
my
guy.
favorite, one of my favorites.
Yeah, your
I
guy.
love his politics, right? Which is a joke. I just want to clarify.
Michael,
That was a joke.
don't get canceled. Do not.
Don't. I happen to be Jewish. I don't love his politics. Anyways, yeah. So you're right. There is like the Venn diagram-ness ish. It's not the Olympic rings. It's the things the rings are closing in on each other for Blake and Jeff.
Yeah.
And even like, I mean, I don't know what orbit Bruce Brown is again. He's like
That's his own,
he's a Halley's Comet.
Yeah, he's a dwarf star.
But and even Nick Claxton, because as much as he is a 5, like that he's a modern day. What you hope he becomes is a modern day 5. He still's like a relatively skinny guy who's not fully in shape, and so he's not full. I don't know. It's an interesting group, and Andre Drummond may get added to it at some point.
My last thought, we talk about the potential eclipse. I think if Blake Griffin starts knocking down threes and that number gets closer to Jeff Green's percentage, I think Blake's at like 31% from three for the season right now. Jeff's over 40%, so that would take a while to literally, pun intended, eclipse. But I think that's where that was funny.
That was really good. I don't know. I don't want to interrupt you, but that was really good.
So we can take a moment to pat myself on the back. It's okay. I'm never on. I never get this kind of praise. So we have lost time to catch up on there. Yeah. But no, I think it comes down to if Blake starts putting up numbers like Jeff Green and benefits from defenses the way Jeff Green has this year, especially when this team is fully healthy, that's when I think we start to head more in that direction. Because to me, if Jeff Green keeps shooting threes at this rate, I mean, it's not going to be as much of a conversation. But again, if Blake Griffin can flaunt that playmaking more and knock down some threes, well, then I think that's where he starts to. Then that's when we're really on a collision course there, and we all got to buy glasses and beat the shortage that happened last time. Yeah.
By the way.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, you go, Brian.
No, please, Mike.
A quick plug for YouTube. This is going to be on YouTube. This podcast, the video of this podcast will be on YouTube. So you'll get to see Alex continually do hand gestures for the eclipse, which really will add. I mean, the performance for the YouTube, you're doing it the best here.
I almost feel like I've YMCA today. I did the Jesus statue. I've done this. Yeah. Like,
need the C and the A. Yeah.
What were you going to say, Brian?
I don't know. I forget.
Yeah, I don't know either. Yeah, you could tell. Well, let's do this. I'll say one small thing, and then I'm going to toss to break.
I remember.
Oh,
is
please,
okay
yes.
Is it a problem if they eclipse? Does it matter? I mean,
that's a great dovetail into what I would say, which is Jeff Green, while he's become a 5 for this team, is a 4. You know, like he should be a 4 on most teams, and can even play like your wing. You know, not that he's going to like offensively create plays, but he's a good enough shooter where if he was your 3 for some stretches, just that's fine. The Nets don't need it, but other teams could. So the good thing is, like, even though we're focusing on center, there is a nice mix of Jeff could play the 4 at times. Blake was playing the 4 last night, and Claxton was playing the 5. Claxton, you really wouldn't want to put out there at the 4 because he's going to kind of like awkwardly be out there offensively. But again, like these are all guys that have versatility to them, particularly Bruce Brown. DeAndre and Nick, though, I think are right now pure 5s, and you really wouldn't play them you wouldn't play those two together at this point.
Yeah, if I can make one more thought off Brian's point about is it a problem if they eclipse? I think it comes down to timing, right? I mean, if Blake Griffin gets settled quickly and the Nets maybe have a few weeks of runway before the playoffs to see them both, you know, maybe at that same level, maybe it's more of a conversation because you can experiment a little more. I mean, if Blake Griffin eclipses Jeff Green right as the playoffs start, are you really going to tinker with that before the biggest postseason in franchise history?
Right.
I don't know. I feel like it comes down to how, you know, if they do eclipse, what's the collision course look like? Does it happen quick, or is it like a slow, you know?
We should have like some like stargazer music. But yeah, this is a great. Yeah. Can I just add one more thing while we're adding things on top of things?
Layer this lasagna.
I brought up Andre Drummond. If Andre Drummond becomes available and he joins the Nets, where does he slot into the?
That's the final prophecy. He's the guy in the Apocalypto temple with the dagger above the heart of. No, I don't know.
I am very anti Andre Drummond signing for the Nets because I don't really. I think he's too similar to DeAndre Jordan. We're talking about eclipses. I mean, They're both limited defensively, grab a bunch of rebounds, are very athletic. I mean, Andre Drummond is younger than DeAndre, but outside of that, I think they're two very similar guys. I've taken some flack for this. I think JaVale McGee, I mean, at least he can handle the ball for his, a guy his size, and he's not a great three-point shooter, doesn't really take a lot of them, but again, like he has a better track record there than DeAndre or Drummond. I feel like that they Reggie Theus was on his radio show a couple weeks ago, and he said that he feels like the Nets' problem right now is having too much of the same thing. They need to diversify those final roster spots. I feel like he's too similar to what they already have.
I agree, and I would also say, like, if you're gonna go for yet another big, I mean, the overlap there is with DeAndre is considerable, but like, in terms of if we're gonna do the Embiid stopper meme, at least there's something chaotic and annoying at him, like the Zaza Pachulia / Robin Lopez mold of just like can probably catch an elbow in your neck. That kind of style of play, I think, gets you a little bit further against a guy like that.
Well, it's interesting. So the Wizards game was last night, and Robin Lopez was signed to be the backup to Thomas Bryant, but he was signed for $7 million, which is a pretty hefty amount for a backup center. Thomas Bryant tears his ACL, so Robin Lopez should be the starter. But the Wizards brought in Alex Len, who has become the guy to get the dominant minutes at center. And I had always liked the thought of maybe the Wizards are going to buy out Robin Lopez. Robin Lopez, like, he would be in my head, he's a better option defensively than Drummond. The thing is, Robin Lopez, if he's not getting minutes on the Wizards, he's probably done.
Well,
right?
I mean, he looked pretty good last night. I mean,
I always think he looks good, but he doesn't get that many minutes for the Wizards comparatively to Alex Len, who was just a guy out on the street.
Yeah.
He was just wandering
Alex
around
Len
the streets of the NBA.
Does not look good. His body looks like his motion is not fluid. But I was thinking, speaking of eclipses last night, I was like, is Robin Lopez the better Lopez brother, or like is he trending in that direction? Is that eclipse happening? Like,
I would be intrigued, like, because what you just want, Alex, Brian and I have talked about this many times. You just want a big dude to kind of lean on Embiid, right? That's really, I mean, you just need someone who's willing to do that. That's a big ask.
This archetype as the sack of potatoes. This is the sack of potato mold.
The Jared Dudley.
Yeah.
And Jared's a little too small at this point. He's positioning himself for the media career, so he's slimmed down. He's on the Lakers, obviously, so he's not coming to the Nets. You just kind of want a sack of potatoes to just push up against Embiid and bother him for 15 minutes a game. I think Drummond can do that. It's whether Drummond is willing to do that. And Embiid and Drummond have beef. I think, and maybe this isn't a good thing, Embiid has always looked to embarrass Drummond in some way in their games. And so is that a good thing? Can Nash deploy Drummond as a psychological weapon against Embiid in some way? I wouldn't put it past Nash to think about it in that way. It's just very intriguing. We're going to learn a lot. The trade deadlines this week, and then the buyouts usually happen. If no trade happens, they happen pretty quickly after that. They just don't really have space for a center. They don't have a space on the roster anymore.
I like the psychological bent to this. Like, I'm just thinking about taking that to the furthest extreme, like just hiring a childhood bully to play center against, just go all in.
You know what I realized we're missing? We were ranking the Nets big men, and we completely left off new addition Alize Johnson, who
forget Alize.
Yeah.
How did we?
10-day Alize. Yeah,
I like that rhyme.
Thank you. I don't know if either of you are Harry Potter fans, but
yes,
there is I think it's in the third book, Defense Against the Dark Arts. There's a test in that class against some magical creature that turns into your fears, your biggest fear. And what is it called?
A buggard. Yeah.
So, for some students, it was a big spider, and others it would be like a violin because they were afraid to play the violin or something. Get that for Embiid.
That was one of them. It was a violin. Someone's afraid to play the violin.
There was small, goofy ones. Everyone had their own.
Get over it. Get over it. This is like the Maury where she's afraid of a jar of pickles. That's yeah.
So the Nets need that for Embiid. What could be what is Embiid's fear? What is his biggest fear? I don't know. That's what the Nets need in their roster.
Solid take.
So to get a what?
That's a great Joel Embiid's boogert.
Yeah.
If I'm pronouncing it right, I'm trying to put an accent on it.
How do you spell it? Is it B-U?
I think it's BOGG.
Yes.
Bogart.
EUART. I haven't read the books in a little bit, but that's a tremendous
Thank you.
reference, Mike. I paying compliments hurts my soul to you, but but you earned that. You earned that.
Let's do this. Let's take a quick break. Coming back, we're talking about Nick Claxton, trade deadline, Spencer Dinwiddie. All right. Welcome back, everyone. So I stepped in it last night. I really stepped in it. Alex, you saw it coming. You immediately tweeted, just be prepared. Your mentions are going to be horrible.
Mike,
This was me last week.
in your defense, you saw this coming as well. Let's be honest here. Let's be real.
I was excited about this.
Yeah.
So I tweeted, I hate to say this, but I am bound by sports podcaster law to do so. Claxton is a very appealing trade piece. Pretty much everyone who tweeted at me said that you're a bad person.
Yeah.
That we are not listening to the podcast anymore.
Unsubscribe. You're losing followers. Yeah.
Yeah. So I stand by exactly what I said. Okay. Regardless of how we all emotionally feel about Nick Claxton, he is a very intriguing young player on a team that happens to be starring, three of the best players in the NBA who has championship aspirations. So, I don't know if this is a discussion to be like, are the Nets going to trade Nick Claxton?
So you just wanted to put that part out there and like the logical next step of like, who would you trade for? You're like, no. I'm just saying people want him and he's good.
Well, if we could turn back the clock here, how about I'm not trying to take over your podcast, Mike, but how about we start with this? If Nick Claxton, I think he's played like 10, 11 games. If he was doing this going into the Harden trade, do you think he is still on this team? Take his numbers now and what he's done, and I'm going to check because that's why we have the internet. If he's, I think he's, I'm not entirely sure if he's played 12 games or is like one short, but the Nets he's played 11 games. So the Nets made the Harden trade 13 games in. If you are 2 games from the Harden trade that Wednesday before they played the Knicks, is Nick Claxton still a net? If you take his current, more hand motions, if you take his current season and just slide that into the first 11 games of the season,
Brag.
would you rather trade him to keep Jarrett Allen?
I am also I'm aware of Mike's conspiracy take on this, what I want to kind of steal is that he suspects that Sean Marks understood the value that he had in Nick Claxton and put him in a rat hole, wanted to hide him.
Phantom injury, yeah.
Wanted to hide him because he knew that if he was playing, that somebody would demand him as part of that trade. Which isn't the worst take. I've maybe heightened some of the more nefarious elements, but yeah.
I think I should I'll admit this is a weakness of I think I should get myself out of the injury take business because, my whole take last year was that Durant was going to come back, and he didn't.
Yeah.
My take this year was that Durant's hamstring injury was phantom, and they just didn't want to play in the All-Star game, and that's obviously not true because he's not.
And now you're accusing Sean Marks of going Tanya Harding on Nick Claxton to prevent him from getting traded.
Of inventing tendinopathy in the knee, right? Is what he had.
Yeah.
No. But I said this on the Daily Ding podcast with Andrew Schlecht, I think last week or 2 weeks ago. Nick Claxton, yes, would have been in the Houston Rockets trade. There is no question in my mind. If Nick Claxton had started the season healthy and played any amount of basketball, he would have been in he would have been in the Harden trade because, one, it's kind of like the Timofey Mozgov situation when the Knicks traded for Carmelo Anthony. It's like, yeah, everyone likes to, make fun of the Knicks for how much they gave up. But really, if you're trying to get Carmelo Anthony, are you not going to give up Timofey Mozgov? Is Mozgov the red line, right? The line in the sand. For the Nets, same situation. If you're going to get James Harden, give up all the draft picks, everything, LeVert, Taurean Prince, Jarrett Allen. If the Rockets had said, also, we want Nick Claxton, what would Marks have said? No, we're not getting James Harden because of Nick Claxton. No, he probably would have been like, oh, give us a second round pick or something, make it give us a little more juice our way. Nick Claxton wouldn't be on the Nets. It's one of the happy sort of accidents. But I'll do sort of the other side of that. If Spencer Dinwiddie was healthy, right, how different would the Rockets trade have been? I think if Dinwiddie's healthy, I think there's also another alternate universe where maybe Jared Allen is still here, or, I don't think Karras would be here, but Spencer Dinwiddie has trade value and he's not playing basketball, right? And we're going to assess that coming up. If he was healthy, he would actually have real trade value right now for a lot of teams.
I've thought about this. I feel like if Nick and Dinwiddie were both healthy, Taurean Prince and Jared Allen were the two likelier of those guys to stay. Taurean, I think, kind of speaks for himself. And then, Jared going into restricted free agency, I think it would have depended on a team with their cap situation and, what it does to get matched. What can we offer him? So I'm of the belief as well that if everyone is healthy on this team, it's Taurean or Jared that are likely staying in Brooklyn, and all the other good pieces are gone like they are right now.
Yeah, and this isn't reporting. I didn't hear this from the Cleveland Cavaliers, but I heard it from another NBA reporter, which was essentially like Jared Allen was in the deal to get rid of Taurean's contract. Taurean's contract was the negative.
Yeah.
And Jared Allen was part of the deal because the Nets didn't have any more first-round picks to really give up Taurean in the deal. So Jared Allen becomes the piece. So if, Dinwiddie's healthy or Claxton had shown something, maybe the Nets could have hung on to Jared Allen. But also, as great as Jared Allen is and as wealthy as Josiah is, the Nets can't pay anyone else.
Yeah.
And that's also, and let's bring up Spencer Dinwiddie. Because a lot of the discussion around Dinwiddie's contract now, because Shams has reported this like crazy. Dinwiddie's going to opt out at the end of his deal, which is opt out at the end of this season because he has a player option for next season. Dinwiddie, of course, is not healthy. He's rehabbing his knee. The idea of the Nets trading Dinwiddie's contract for a player who actually can play basketball right now is also based around the idea that the Nets do not want to pay Dinwiddie's next contract. I think that also is important for figuring out which players are going to be on this team if they trade Dinwiddie. Because if they don't want to pay Dinwiddie's next deal, $15, $20 million per year, they probably don't want to bring back someone who is super expensive or has a really long-term contract. I wouldn't think. Alex, you've done a lot of good stories. I think you did one with Seth Partnow. You did one with John Hollinger. When you've brought up the Dinwiddie possibilities, what do they say and what do you think about what the Nets could do at this trade deadline?
Yeah, I think that this is one of the most unique things in the NBA that's honestly not really getting talked about that much. I've texted every scout, agent, person I could think of that has an opinion worth my time. And, I've said, have you ever seen a situation where you have a player that's injured? All indications are he is going to free agency, and you're trading for him essentially for the chance to either recruit him and get him under a long-term deal, or maybe you flip him to send him to another team for same reasons. And what does the market look like if that's the case? And as we just kind of talked about the Harden trade, Dinwiddie's the only contract you can move now that nets you anything of significant return. And again, significant, what does that even mean? So I've gotten answers all over the board of, it's a difficult thing to gauge. Some of it's going to be, does this, where is Spencer Dinwiddie and this team in terms of how they feel about one another? Would they, do they want to sign Spencer Dinwiddie to an extension? Does he want to sign an extension there? It seems like there's a lot of rotation players that come up when it comes to who they could get back for him, but maybe not guys that I could see being there for a while. James Edwards, our Pistons writer, we did a mock trade of Mason Plumlee and Wayne Ellington to the Nets for Dinwiddie and a second-round pick. I call that the reunion trade because Dinwiddie's going back to Detroit, the team that drafted him. Mason Plumlee and Wayne Ellington both were Nets briefly. We were talking about ranking Nets big men. I don't really think Mason Plumlee helps the Mason Plumlee is not Joel Embiid's Boggart.
Nice.
So, so I don't really know what they get. And I mean, Wayne Ellington's a good veteran off the bench, but again, I don't really know if he addresses a need. Um,
He
I
does.
think
I
that
mean, it would
they
be
already have
cool to
shooting off
have
the bench
him.
with Shamit. Yeah,
Yeah.
like he's shooting like again, like he's shooting I think over 40% from three, but they already have that with like a few other guys. So I don't know if that's it. Like, what does that trade look like? You know, some people have talked about them, maybe flipping him to Orlando for Kem Birch. Um, I don't know. I think Kem Birch is an interesting one. He's a more mobile big. Has a relationship with Steve Nash, the Canadian national team. Um, but again, I don't know if Spencer Dinwiddie would want to stay in Orlando, an organization that looks like they're about to be selling off everything and their mother. Aaron Gordon wants out. Evan Fournier is coming up in trade talk, so that's a weird fit to me. So I don't know if there's a natural. Hollinger proposed Doug McDermott to the Nets for Dinwiddie, which is an interesting one. Again, more shooting off the bench. Landry Shamit's hurt. He'd have an immediate need, but or an immediate role for now. But I haven't heard a deal where if I were Sean Marks, I would take that in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's tough.
And that to me makes it interesting at the same time.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I agree. And like every time people bring this up, they're like, "Yeah, don't be dumb. You with this tiny window, you have to load up as much as you possibly can to win." But I have yet to hear of like a name that kind of like makes me excited beyond Spencer Dinwiddie. And if he does come back and he does play in the playoffs, and that is like part of your deep bench rotation. I mean, again, this is best case scenario. I have no idea about what his Instagram is telling a very rosy story. So, if we're looking for pure on-court production for just a very short window of time, and then like you were saying, none of these deals are very natural. Also, people have a whole bunch of like risk associated with the re-sign. All that's fair. You may not get a lot back. So I don't know. Is like the on-court short window best case scenario to have Spencer come back and play in the playoffs? I don't know.
Yeah.
I two things on that. I talked to Seth Partnow is of the belief that there is no monetary value for Dinwiddie to come back in the playoffs. Like he's not going to make himself any more money, and if he gets hurt, he's screwed. And I also, Spencer Dinwiddie's been posting a lot on Instagram of his rehab, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I asked a trained, licensed physical therapist. I showed them the videos to kind of see what this means, and they essentially said that Spencer Dinwiddie's rehab is on pace. Like what he's doing looks impressive, but that's everything you'd expect him to be doing for someone that is this far out from his surgery and all that. So I thought for a minute, I'm just as stupid as everybody else sometimes, where I'm like, oh my God, like he looks like in really good shape. Well, it appears that he's right on track. It doesn't appear like he's like having a Marcus Stroman type rehab where he's back in 6 months and that's that. So I think it would be right on the line for him coming back during the playoffs. And I mean, honestly, if I were Spencer Dinwiddie, I mean, we all know his career arc, right? I mean, drafted by the Pistons after tearing his ACL at Colorado. Went to the G League. The Nets kind of revitalized his career. I mean, this is his best and maybe only chance to get paid. I wouldn't screw that up.
I think, but here's the thing: Spencer he's the ball's on this guy. Alex, let me tell you, like he always bets on himself at every risks it all at every moment. So I would, if it was anybody else, I would say that tracks. But I would say like Spencer's a kind of a unique individual in that he may throw the dice on something like that. I don't know. That's a feeling argument, but
yeah. And if I'm Dinwiddie, I do want to get traded because what will happen is like the curse of the bird rights for that team that gets him. Whatever they give up to get Spencer Dinwiddie, they will feel more motivated to re-sign Dinwiddie because they gave up something for a guy who could leave and they could get, they wouldn't even get nothing. They would have had a negative because they gave up something to get him. One team that's interesting to me is, and we've heard his name linked to this team many times, the Dallas Mavericks. Dallas kept being in rumors all offseason about Dinwiddie, wanting Dinwiddie. Oh, they were very interested in Dinwiddie. And Dallas, I don't know where they are in the standings. I'm not looking at it right now. Their season is fine from what I roughly remember, and I'll look it up, but they're not like this team that like knows that they're going to win an NBA championship right now this season. Everything is still focused on where can the team go with Luka. They're the 8th seed right now. They have 22 wins. They're in the mix with the Spurs, the Mavericks, the Warriors, and then the Grizzlies are like right below, like a couple of games below that. So the Mavericks are looking at play-in tournament, then meeting up with the Jazz or the Suns in the first round of the playoffs.
Who would you want back?
So this is what could work. I don't love Josh Richardson. I don't care about bigs anymore for the Nets. I don't think there's a big out there that makes a difference against Embiid or the Bucks or Anthony Davis. I don't think that exists for the Nets anymore. That's any different from buyout Andre Drummond or what the Nets currently have. I just don't think that guy's out there that they can get. So Josh Richardson is making roughly the same amount of money as Spencer Dinwiddie. He hasn't been that great this year. He's averaging like 12 points a game, but he's not shooting threes really that well anymore. He's known as a defense first guy, though his defense isn't as good as it used to be either. But he is, a athletic 6'6" wing who has had a history of playing pretty good defense from the wing spot. He's kind of guy that like you could add into the mix. They don't really have that guy, like
a wing defender.
They have a lot of great ball handlers. They have 4s and 5s now in Blake and Claxton and Jeff Green and DeAndre Jordan. They have the pure shooter and like Shamet and Joe Harris, and Joe Harris plays better defense than most believe. But they don't have that guy that like just like the guy they could throw on and try to get some decent, like the Jeremy Grant type.
They auditioned Andre Roberson,
right.
obviously, and Iman Shumpert, at that position this year, and that hasn't worked out. Go ahead.
And I see from Dallas's point of view, it's like they're not doing anything this year. Like they're good. They're probably happy to make the playoffs, and they love putting Luka in a playoff situation and seeing what he can do. But Josh Richardson isn't going to change their trajectory dramatically, and they would probably love to have a guard like Dinwiddie next to Luka for the next 4 years. And for the Nets, it's like, all right, well, we get a wing that's usable for sure that we're not going to get in the buyout market. Richardson is better than any buyout wing that they could get. And Richardson's contract, he has a player option at the end of this year too. So he could leave at the end of this season. And, I think if Sean Marks is going to be honest, he probably can't keep going to Joe Tsai and saying, can you please give me more money? The Nets are paying a lot of money for their guys. You can't keep paying more money for these guys.
Yeah. I think some of my butt hurt also stems from like having to give D'Angelo Russell up for so little, and then having to do it again with another starting quality point guard. It's just like, we're paying such high prices to get for our buying purposes, and then when we're selling, it's like we get second round picks and stuff for our best players.
Alex? What do you think of Josh Richardson?
I think it's a good. I think it'd be a good move, honestly. I've only met Josh once, but his college coach, Konzo Martin, I covered before covering the Nets. And, the way he's kind of carved out his NBA career, it seems like he's, as you said, he's kind of built on defense first, but he can also score a little bit. I think he averaged 16, 17 points a game with Miami. Not that they need it, but I mean, it's not like, Andre Roberson and Iman Shumpert. I think the common thread between the two of them is that they were signed for defense, but when you saw them shoot on offense, you were like, ooh. And at least he's a guy where if he gets an open look, he's way more likely to make that than the previous two combined. So I don't think that's a bad move at all. And I think, you look at the long-term potential with Spencer in Dallas. I mean, his longtime girlfriend, speaking of the Robersons, obviously he's from San Antonio. They have a house there. I think the more I think about it, the more I like that.
Did they buy Popovich's house? Did they buy the Jerusalem, the one with the? I don't know if you're following.
I think they
Jerusalem wine cellar. Have you been aware of what?
Gorgeous wine cellar.
Yeah. Reclaimed.
They bought. I think they bought a house in August, and the pop stuff started early September, like right before Steve Nash was hired. So
remember when Pop was going to be head coach?
That was Mike. That was you. You were the one that was
the Pop
only one propagating that myth.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That one of my favorite when I was doing those coaching profiles for the short time. I took so much crap for it, but I thought it was such a ridiculous thing we were doing to begin with. Like I said, coaching profile for Greg Popovich: strengths, one of the greatest coaches of all time. Weakness, is getting old or whatever. It was so tongue in cheek. Yeah, but
he's an old dude.
Yeah. Diago Splitter posted on Instagram recently, like Pop had given him a couple wine bottles when the Nets were in San Antonio. I would love to get my hands on some Pop wine.
Pop wine. Anyways, so I'll ask this, but I don't even really have a great answer. I'll start with Alex. Percent chance the Nets do trade Dinwiddie. I think it's possible they make a trade and it's small. But if they make the Dinwiddie, if they use the Dinwiddie contract, they're going to get someone who has a pretty good salary. What do you think the chances are that they make a deal using Dinwiddie's salary?
I'm going to say 90%.
Wow.
That's high. Do you know something, Alex? What do you know?
Shocked.
What do you know?
I just
He's texting with Sean Marks right now, everyone. Go to the YouTube. You'll see Alex is texting someone as we're talking. And it's Sean. He showed the phone. No, he didn't show the phone. But
I just think, first off, I mean, I've been hearing his name thrown out a lot for a while. He's their last good asset. They're all in on this season. We all know he's probably leaving for free agency. You don't want to lose him for nothing. I just think the writing is all over the wall.
Stop writing on the walls, folks.
I can't.
No more. Who writes on the walls? Come on.
I mean, I was already going to come in at like.
I was going to come in like 40%. I was
Wow,
like,
really?
Way
40?
weak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, stick that.
What do you got?
I was coming in at like 60, but Alex obviously like that sold me. So
Go over him. Go 95.
You want 90? I'm going to go 90.5. 90.5. Yeah.
You're going to price us right,
Right.
mate.
Yeah.
Can I will say one last thing before we go. I know we were led to believe the Nets were bereft of assets, which to deal and all that stuff. I don't know. I think if you put a trade package with Nick Claxton in it now, that becomes a real thing. Like, Nick Claxton's making no money. He's already shown that he's ultra athletic.
Has one more year of control.
And so I think if you do like a
combo of Claxton plus Dinwiddie kind of checks a few boxes there. I mean, this is sacrilege. I'm sorry, I am flagellating myself as I do this.
Yeah.
But it is the one if you're looking to get something of true value back, you align Spencer, a complicated asset, with Nick Claxton, a uncomplicated great asset, and then you can go from there.
I mean, I would even say if you put Shamet has rehabbed. Shaman is playing really well. If you put and I wouldn't want to do this, but if you're Sean Marks and you're desperate for one final piece, whoever that is, I don't know who that is. If you put Shaman, Nick Claxton, and then Dinwiddie contract together, if you're if you're the Kings or if you're the Cavs or any other team that doesn't really have a shot at the playoffs and does have one good player, whoever that is, that's Shaman and Claxton is pretty nice, and they're cheap, and they're still young. Give
me an example. The best player you can get with that package, Mike, and then I'm with you 100%. Then you'll have sold me on this Nick Claxton section.
I don't want Harrison Barnes, but if I'm Harrison Barnes is linked to the Boston Celtics so much, but the Boston trade packages are like, here we'll fit him into our trade exception, and we'll give you Aaron Nesmith.
Do you realize how badly
Hammett and Claxton are better than Nesmith?
We're gonna get killed for wanting to trade Nick Claxton for Harrison Barnes? People are gonna kill you.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to do it. I'm just saying Harrison Barnes, Larry Nance Jr., name those guys on bad teams. Nick Claxton and Shaman are better than whatever Boston wants to give people. It's better than whatever Miami wants to give people because Miami doesn't want to give up anything but precious, maybe. Maybe they want to give up their precious. It's...
Well, the trade that I took flack for with our colleague Kelly Iko was Dinwiddie, Claxton, and I think a second for PJ Tucker. And I don't know if it's worth trading for a 35-year-old PJ Tucker. At least Josh Richardson is 27 to your earlier point. But again, like some of the fans thought that I cheated on them. And it's my loyalties are not to them, it's to the truth. But
there we go.
But
democracy dies in the darkness. I know what you're saying.
If you are I love it. If you're a team like Houston, a young rebuilding team, I mean, wouldn't you want a Shamet or a Claxton more than anything else, to see what you have in them, and then who with all these draft, I agree. I don't think you can do a deal with a team like you just described that, getting a veteran, a good piece from a losing team that's probably going to rebuild and tank without giving up one or both of those guys, because that's exactly what they're looking for right now.
This is the end of the pod, and this is the worst thing to do in podcasting, which is to leave something like this at the end, but I will. I just looked up Kristaps Porzingis' salary. The Nets have always loved Kristaps. Before, when he was on the Knicks, the Nets were trying to trade for him, and Sean Marks, at least previously, had been known to love Kristaps Porzingis. Kristaps is making $27 million this year. Dinwiddie's making like $12 million, so there's a big gap. You can't trade DeAndre Jordan. DeAndre Jordan's still untradeable. I'm just saying, there's something.
Wow.
There's something. Dinwiddie, Claxton, Shamet. There's something.
I think that prize Zingis loose.
Put Tyler Johnson in. You just put everyone in there. You can.
That's
can
it. That's
fit
the one that puts it over the top.
Into the deal. Timothy Cabarro.
Yeah.
Fit them all in there. See if that gets you to Kristaps. And now Kristaps is the Embiid stopper.
Nick Claxton for Kristaps is as at least it doesn't get you.
Let me look at that. Let me fucking see if I can get that.
On fire.
Can I just say, even if DeAndre Jordan was tradable, would Dallas really be the team to take him?
They did that experiment, and I don't think they liked it very much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly my case in point.
Yeah. I'm going to, just as we talk, I'm just going to look up to see, NBA Trade says that it basically is impossible. Like, the Nets would have to put DeAndre in the trade, and that's just not happening. I think that's an impossibility. I don't think that there's any way that the Nets could put DeAndre Jordan in a trade, even though, just body language doctor over here, Bruce Brown told us on the pod that DeAndre and James Harden, they don't fight, but they constantly are talking and disagreeing over how defense should be played.
You're distorting this just so it's perfectly. Yeah.
If you do put DeAndre Jordan in the trade, it's a very easy trade to get done. Good. So,
well,
and the Nets win total decreases if you do that. Okay, this was great, Alex. Thank you so much for being here. It'll be an exciting trade deadline. If you want to read Alex's writing, just go on his Twitter, click on one of the stories that he posted, subscribe that way.
New subscribers can join for $1 a month.
It's an amazing deal.
Heck of a deal.
Thank you all for listening. Go to iTunes, subscribe.
And if you liked me, at BK Glue Guys on Twitter, lobby for me to return.
All right. Bye, Brian.
Oh, bye. Oh, bye, everybody.